gathered here to this interesting symposium. We are going to discuss training and testing, and there will be 3 interesting talks, and then there will be my presentation first, and I will try to deal a little bit with this topic about how to do fitness testing and training in football. And to switch. Okay, so I have to walk a little bit. I have to work. That's fair enough. Performance in football, we have to remember that that's not only the physiological aspect, as we are going to discuss more intensely during the talk this afternoon, but we definitely have also the tactical, technical factors, and at top level, definitely also the psychological factor, or even at a lower level, the psychological factor is so important. And I'm a coach that happens to know a little bit about physiology, so the questions may be related to the coaching role afterwards. But let me just take you through some of these aspects first. The 4 main areas are influencing performance, and we are going to discuss the physical aspect in more details today. So, what is that then depending on? The performance in, you may say, any sport is depending on a number of factors. And if we are talking about all the codes of football, we have an endurance performance aspect. We have the ability to perform high-intensity exercise repeatedly during the game. We have sprint performance, and we have force development in single actions. Kick in football, actions with in-fights in rugby, for example. And these factors are also depending on the ability of the neural system, having a significant influence on the force you can develop in a single action. There are a number of external factors that are influencing performance, like the temperature, as we heard this morning, humidity, altitude, field condition, and nutrition is another external factor that we are able to manipulate. So, what is that then depending on our performance? Yes, we can subdivide that into a number of categories. We can talk about aerobic performance, anaerobic performance, or muscle strength or muscle power, whatever you like it. And there we have a possibility to do actual measurements, like the aerobic performance, maximal aerobic power, maximal oxygen uptake we can measure, and we can get a pretty precise measure of what is actually that specific capacity of our player. And you may also go and look at, for example, the rate of force development, and very important factor when we are discussing all these codes of football. How fast can you develop force is an essential part, which you can measure in a laboratory, for example. Then, what is that then depending on? Yeah. It depends on our system. Of course, what systems do we have? We have a respiratory system, we have a cardiovascular system, and then we have our muscles that are setting the scene for the performance of these, performance there, and finally the performance in a game setting. And these are not that easy to change. There are some internal factors. Sex, we may change, but it's not that often happening. So age, maturation, and the body composition. That does have an influence on each of these factors. So muscle characteristics we can highlight. We can also highlight some related to the cardiovascular system. This is just a few of them. I just mentioned them here because some you will see later on, like the iron transport system. That does have a significant influence on a number of these performance factors, and then at the end of the day also performance in the game. And here blood volume, capillaries, and so on. So we can get a more detailed picture of what is actually the capacity of the people or the person we are dealing with. We could take a muscle biopsy to get information about that. We could measure the blood volume and so on. So we can get those more detailed physiological characteristics in different ways. And then it's easy. That is just to find the right way to train. Aerobic training, anaerobic training, or strength training. You just need to know I'm doing this type of training because I changed this, then I changed this, I changed this, and then I change performance. Easy, isn't it? Yeah. And what do we know? We know that training helps us. What we may not know is exactly what type of training we have to do and when. Isn't it? As a coach, I'm a coach. I just want to know, is he going to do anaerobic training? Is he going to be better? Isn't it? That's what it is at the end of the day. That's the way we adjust when we are there. Because they look at the results on the Sunday. They don't care whether we have made any change in the iron transport system or any change in muscle strength. They just care about the result. But in order to optimize that, it may be quite helpful to understand how that specific type of training is actually changing these things. Because then we have a chance to decide what to do and when to do. Yeah, you don't seem to be convinced. We'll see. Before you start, we need to look at the physical demands of any sport. I have chosen football, just as a coincidence today, looking at some of the demands. They will be very short now because you all know these things. But just highlighting some of the things that have been discussed previously. Top class Italian players compared to professional players in a lower league. What's happening with the high intensity work in a game. This is the first 15 minutes, next 15 and next 15 minutes, and this is second half. The black ones, you see distance in meter, high intensity running. For the top class players are black, and the white ones are the moderate, but still professional level, the players, and you see all the black ones are higher than the white ones. So, what is the conclusion? And that's fair enough, isn't it? Soon you will have a chance to give me the conclusion. So, okay, that gives at least an idea that this high intensity work is of importance. When we then compare teams that are in the top, middle, or in the bottom, in the same league, also there we apparently could see a difference. This is professional players at a lower level. You see a difference here. If you then do that, exactly the same thing for the English Premier League, for example, in a second you can see it's even more pronounced when you talk about sprinting, but the English players, you don't see that type of difference. So it's also dependent on the level of football. You see there were no difference. That was the point of this. Top 5, middle 10, bottom 5. You see that's the total high intensity distance here. And you can see the values are very equal. So there doesn't seem to be a difference in terms of a top class team and a bottom team in terms of high intensity performance. But it's more complex than that. But it is more complex because, as we discussed the first day, we are not talking about a team. We are talking about 11 individuals. So we don't even know what they are doing, even though we know they're a central midfield player, for example. This is high intensity work for players in different positions, and you see here central midfield players. One player is running 2,000 meters and another is 2,600 meters. It becomes even more extreme with a fullback. For example, here you're talking about 1,200 meters and another fullback 2,600 meters. Who is that? 2,600, a fullback, international football. Could you give him one example? Who's the fullback that goes 2,600 meters?
Alves.
Alves, that's a good one. You agree or? No. You don't know it. You don't know him? It's a player from a smaller team in Spain. No, you don't agree. Okay, but isn't that important to understand that? That even though we have a fullback now, performing 2,600, we have another fullback that performs 1,600 meters. Why only 1,600 meters? Why? No, you don't want to answer that question. You don't have to. But there may be some tactical limitations. There may be some physical limitations. Who knows? But we need to understand that at the time when we're going to train these guys. So, there are large individual differences. What is that related to? different physical capacity. And tactical roles. Yeah. So far I said nothing you didn't know beforehand. I will tell you if I say something you didn't know. That you have to remember when you leave. Okay? Stay attentive. Fatigue during a soccer game, does that occur? We need to understand that because we may avoid that. We may like as a coach to avoid that. Does it occur? Sometimes yes. This is an indication at least. This is first half, this is second half, divided into 5-minute periods. High intensity running during a game, performed pretty much in the beginning. Every player performs almost the highest, the most high intensity work in the beginning of the game. And it seems that there is some decrease in performance towards the end. It was also discussed yesterday for the female football. And there may be a number of other reasons than actually the physical. So what we did was measuring the sprint capacity, as you saw from the female yesterday, after the game. And this is 5 sprints, separated by 25 seconds. This is at the end of the first half, the open one. This is before the game, and you see there was no difference between performance before the game and the end of the first half. But the performance at the end of the game was not as good as it was before the game. These are times, so the higher the time, the worse is the performance. You agree? Maybe. Temporary fatigue. This morning it was discussed a bit. Temporary fatigue, does it occur? Apparently there is some type of temporary fatigue. We have again the 5 sprints. We have now taken out the players after an intense period in the first half. This is before the game. And this is after we took him out, and you see performance is not as good as it was. You remember from the previous slide, and they have recovered at the end of the first half, isn't it? So apparently some type of fatigue occurs, but it disappears again. That's the beauty, isn't it? That's what we have to aim to, for making the recovery as fast as possible, isn't it? So, it looks like it does occur. What's the reason for that? And I've discussed that very briefly with you. We don't have the time, but I'll do that anyway. Because it's important when we are going to understand the results I'm going to show you later. What could it be? And this is a very long story, this one. People have spent hundreds of years to understand that. And we have tried to go deeper into that. But it doesn't seem to be the muscle lactate, does not seem to be the lower pH per se that causes fatigue. It doesn't seem to be the lower creatine phosphate, which we definitely will see after an intense period during the game. So what is it then? There are a number of possibilities. One that we have explored a little bit further is the accumulation of potassium. So what's happening when the muscle contracts, it releases potassium. What's happening then with the membrane potential? You can see it becomes less negative. You have the scale over here, it becomes less negative. Doesn't really affect the performance because here you have the performance of the fiber. But at one point it becomes so negative that you do start seeing an effect on the performance. You see more and more potassium accumulating, having an effect on the membrane potential, and then the force is decreasing. And at one point, even though you like to do it, there's too much potassium around, you cannot contract your muscle fiber, and you're tired. And we all know that situation. 300 meter in the 400 meter, oh yes, some fibers are fatigued, isn't it? So, why and where are we? Here we have potassium concentrations around 10, 12 millimolars shown in vitro to have a significant effect on the muscle contraction. Okay?